Hi, I hope you've had a great day. Thank you for joining me. We are live in clinic today. It's been an amazing clinic day, helping people get healthier, working through their lifestyles. I hope you've been working on getting healthier yourself. This study that I'm going to talk about has been on my desk for a while. I have a little packet of studies that I have just set for me to read and look through. And this one's been in there, and I finally figured this was the week to talk about it. So let's start with just the idea about fat. So, fat is a word that just seems to strike fear in the hearts of everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the fat that's on your plate, the fat that's on your body, the fat that's in your organs, the fat that's in your cholesterol. The word fat just makes everybody kind of freak out. And there's this general belief that fat that we eat equals getting fat, like gaining weight on our body. And that when we eat fat, we also get fat in our arteries and get clogged arteries. Only problem is dietary fat and fat that's in our body under our skin and fat that's in our organs and in our arteries is completely different. It's not the same. Dietary fat and this fat that's on the rest of you are different things. And I wish they had different names, but they both have the word fat. So everybody just assumes one equals the other. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. But the question is, does that apply to the liver? And why would the liver be any different than your arteries or the subcutaneous fat on your body? It's because the liver is a filtration organ. So it takes what you eat and it filters through. So it might make sense that if you're eating more fat, you would get more fat in the liver, right? Because it's filtering through. Well, that's the question. That's the question. And let's back up a step further. So, the number one risk factor for something called non alcoholic fatty liver disease, meaning you're getting fat and damage to your liver without drinking alcohol, because most of us are used to the idea of cirrhosis. Well, this one is in people that don't drink at all, they're getting it just from fat deposits into the liver. Well, the number one risk factor is obesity. Well, and here in America, we're winning the obesity race. Okay. We have an over 40% rate of obesity here in the US. When you compare that to other countries, we're getting there faster. Like in France, it's only a 17% obesity rate. So, what is making us do that? And honestly, it's because our Western diet is unique. It's unique from other countries, and we're slowly infiltrating and getting in there. And when you see other countries that adopt a Western diet, you see their obesity rates start to really kick up and pick up. Well, what does a Western diet look like? The first thing is it's very high caloric. Now, even though I don't like talking about calories a lot, the Western diet in general is very high caloric. It's also very high fat, dietary fat. So there are a lot of oils and things in what we eat. It is also high in refined carbohydrates. So these are carbs that have been processed and they break down quickly to sugar. It's also high in added sugar and added salt. These are all parts of the Western diet. So that being said, obesity and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, they're linked. They're buddy buddy. Okay. And here in America, since we suffer with obesity at one of the highest rates, we kind of also suffer from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease from a highest rate. And we have these guidelines. Now, guidelines are for another discussion because I don't agree with all the guidelines that are out there, but our medicine guidelines list dietary changes as the number one intervention for getting rid of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, specifically dietary interventions that lead to fat loss or weight loss. Now, the US in general has subscribed for over 40 years to the idea of a low calorie diet to help with weight loss. And it does help lose weight. However, long-term studies and the research show it's just not very effective. It's not a good long-term intervention, but we still been pushing it anyways. You know, here in our clinic, we use the low carb diet. And the low carb diet has a whole lot of research behind it, actually more than the low calorie diet and the low fat diet. It's showing superiority for weight loss. And also not necessarily having to get in a calorie deficit to produce weight loss. It's been shown as being safe and effective. So the question is, can it help non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? I mean, come on, you're eating fat and the liver's filtering it. So that sounds a little dangerous. That's where this study comes in. The object of this study is to compare the effects of a low carb, high fat diet to a Western diet on how the progression of obesity, glucose tolerance, and non-alcoholic fatty liver go. And these are in mice, not in human, I admit that. But these are diet-induced obese mice that are going through this. So the study, it was put out in Frontiers, and it was from March of 2024. So this is a very recent study, from this year. This is new, fresh data. The title, it's very wordy. It is Hypercaloric, Low Carbohydrate, High Fat Diets Protect the Development of Non-Alcoholic Fatty Liver Disease in Obese Mice in Contrast to Isocaloric Western diet. So basically, isocaloric meaning same amount of calories. One protects against fatty liver, one does not. So in this study, there's essentially 4 groups of mice. They have around 35 mice in this group. They break them into 4 categories. The first is a control group, and the control group was fed a standard chow diet, standard mice chow diet. Now, when you look at the breakdown of this, it's about a 20% fat, 15% protein, 64% carb. That diet in particular is very similar to what, say, the American Heart Association recommends for healthy heart eating and for fat loss. So keep that in mind. The mice on that diet on average ate around 3.8 calories per gram. Why is that important? You'll find out a little bit later, but per gram of each little mice, they ate about 3.8 calories. The Western diet, which is more what the majority of Americans eat, was about a 57% fat, around a 14% protein, and 27% carbohydrate. And those little mice ate 5.5 calories per gram. Then there was the low carb, high fat arm. Okay, so those little mice ate about the same, still 5.5 grams. Now, the mice were allowed to eat as much as they want, as long as it was in the ratio of those things. So your Western diet and your low carb diet, the mice chose to eat around the same amount. But on the low carb diet, the main things to notice was the fat intake went up to about 77%, the protein went up to almost 19%, and the carb content was kept around 4%. So same calorie amount, very strict differences in the composition of the macronutrients. They also pulled 9 mice out. They fed them the Western diet for 10 weeks, and then they humanely sacrificed them very quickly, very painlessly. We're not getting into the whole animal ethics here, but these mice, they sacrificed so that we could look at what the Western diet looks like when you're fed that and compare those organs to what Western diet looks like after you've been fed it longer and also after there's a nutritional change. So now I'm going to get some technology in here. This is something new for me, guys. This is a graph from the study that's here. So what I want you to notice is, let's start up here at the top. So the study was 16 weeks long. So that's what you're going to see along this line. And this is the amount of calories that the little mice ate. Remember, they were allowed to eat as much as they want to. The chow was just put in a certain macronutrient. So these little white colored circle things, that's the standard chow or the typical diet for an American Heart Association type thing. Then you can see the little triangles. They're kind of almost bleed in together and separate just slightly up here. But both of those are the low carb, high fat diet and the Western diet. And remember, they were allowed to eat however much they wanted to, but they ended up naturally eating about the same amount. And as you can see, all of them, what I found interesting is the longer they studied them, the more they ate. And it could just be that the mice got older. They started here as juvenile mice, and over here they were kind of older and they just could eat more. But that's not part of the study. I just found it interesting. All right, let's go down here and look at this bottom part. So these little circles again are the standard chow diet mice, the American Heart Association mice. Now, as you notice, they did gain weight, and even at the part of the dietary change, their diet didn't change, but they still continued to gain weight. When you look at the weight amount for the other 2 groups, so the Western diet and the low carb, high fat diet, both of them great increase. So they were forcing these little mices to become big fat mices. And then what happens? They started this change. So up until this point, both of these groups were eating the Western diet. And then one arm went on to eat more of a low carb, high fat diet. And then this little arm went on to continue to eat the Western diet. And you can see there's a stark change. Their calorie amount didn't change. They were still eating the same amount of calories, but one started losing weight and one started gaining weight. So that's kind of the overall things. All 3 groups, like I said, it's interesting. All 3 groups gained weight. This one still gained weight a little bit slower, and I found that quite interesting. So those are findings. Now I'm going to remove this, and bear with me because I am going to get another graph up there I know I usually don't do this with you guys, but I love these little graphs in part of here. So I'm going to share screen and this one. All right. So this is going to help us frame the rest of the talk. So the mice on the Western diet chose to eat a lot. They were not feeling very full and satiated. The standard American, or not the standard American, the standard chow mices, they were eating till satiety, but they keep eating more along the time as well. So the Western diet continuously gained weight after the change. And when they sacrificed the mice down the road and they looked at where the fat was gained, it was gained in the gonads, in the kidneys, and in the subcutaneous. And why did I want to point that out? Because the Western diet scares me a little bit for our generations down the road. How if we're continuing to put fat in and around our gonads, how's that going to affect our ability to procreate down the road? In the kidneys, that's talking about the visceral fat, and we're making our visceral fat higher and getting more and more unhealthy. So what happened though, so you see 10-week, all the mice got fat at the split, Western diet mice, low carb mice. The Western diet mice increased their weight gain, their glucose tolerance got worse, they became hyperinsulinemia, they were getting more and more insulin, and their livers got really big and fat. What happened when you went on low carb, high fat diet? They stopped gaining weight, they started losing weight, their glucose became more normalized, their insulin levels normalized, and their liver weight was normal. Remember, same amount of calories, but this one was forcing fat out of the liver and losing weight on the same amount of calories. When you look at the livers of the mice that were on the Western diet, lots and lots of fat deposits, not so much in the low carb. The other thing that was kind of interesting is they looked at genetic expressions for fatty liver. And when you look at the Western diet, this FASN gene expression shot up significantly, meaning that they were having to really work about with the fat in their liver. Well, over here in the high carb or low carb, high fat diet, that gene expression went down, or it was normal, and then other gene expressions went down, meaning that they were breaking down fat appropriately and not storing fat in the liver. Those are some cool takeaways there. And the fact that all of this stuff, the insulin, the liver weight, all of that things, I kind of predict, and this wasn't in the study, but I predict that given time, you would have seen the low carb diet mice continue to lose weight, and you would have seen the Western diet continue to gain weight. I also think you would have eventually seen the standard chow mice gain weight and get fatty liver too, somewhere down the road. I can't say that for sure because it wasn't part of the study, but it makes sense if you're following the trend and you're seeing it go up and up and their intake is continuing to go up and up, that they're going to get there eventually. It's just not in the study. Now, I can say that I've seen it in real life. It's just a slower weight gain, but it's still a weight gain. It's a slower fat deposit in the liver, but it is still happening. So at 16 weeks, same amount of calories, higher fat, the organ that filters the fat is healing and getting better. So their conclusion was the low carb, high fat diet prevented and possibly reversed hepatomegaly, the swelling of the liver, the fat that's in the liver, compared to the Western diet. And then there's that whole gene expression side of things, meaning that the liver was functioning more normally. It's looking kind of good for getting more fat in your diet, not less fat in your diet, to treat a condition that has fat in the name. But remember that dietary fat, the fat that you put in your mouth and the fat that's trapped, looks different. And it makes a little bit of sense when you think of it in like a ninth grade science kind of way. You know, if you have fat floating in water and then you've got kind of a barrier, that water's moving kind of back and forth really easily. The fat's not so much. So our fat's getting pushed on out and getting used a little bit more somewhere else down the road. Something else is triggering that fat in the liver that's in the Western diet and is not as much in the standard chow diet that we saw in the mice. What could that be? I think it's sugar. I think it's sugar, and I think it is specifically fructose. You can look at some of the work by Dr. Lustig and fructose and how that is pushing fat into the liver. But we just have sugar added to everything. I mean, sugar is even added to our Morton's table salt that is out there. Flip it over, go to the grocery store and read it. It is salt and sugar. It is hidden everywhere. And then when our diets are ones that consume a lot of processed and refined foods, our liver just can't filter those the same way. Now, we need more human studies to show this exact point. It's nice to see it in mice, but we need to see it in humans in hardcore research. And I can tell you my clinical experience is when I put people on a high fat, low carb diet, whole foods, not processed junk foods, not a lot of the keto products that are out there, whole foods, high fat, low carb. I have seen fatty liver quickly reverse itself. And in some cases, I've seen it reverse itself in as little as 3 months. It depends on the severity of the fatty liver. I've seen the numbers as far as the liver functions normalize that quickly. It takes consistency and it takes the desire to do it and a whole family intervention, but it is very possible. So I look forward to seeing those human studies down the road. I hope you guys do too. That's it for today. Now, remember, low carb for better health is just around the corner. And you might even find some people talking about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease there at Low Carb for Better Health. That again is August 23rd and 24th at Montgomery Bell State Park here in Tennessee. There's a few tickets left, not very many. So if you want to join us, please go get your tickets now so that you can make sure to be there. The website to look at is www.lc4bh.com. That is the letter LC, the number 4bh.com. I hope you're there to join us. Until next time, be healthy and stay away from those things that cause fatty liver. I don't want you to have that. Bye, guys.